Good evening. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the City Council meeting of Monday, December 3rd, 2018. And we'll start with a prayer by Councilman Adam Lallam.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for our many blessings. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing responsibilities to the citizens of Watertown. I pray for our city officials, staff, and for this assembled council that you would graciously grant them the wisdom to govern among conflicting interests and issues, a sense of welfare and true needs of our people, a desire for justice, confident in what is good and what is decent, the ability to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreements, personal peace in their lives and joy in their task. I pray for the agenda set before us today. Please give us any assurance of what would please you and what would benefit those who live, work, and do business and enjoy Watertown on a daily basis. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Thank you, Councilman. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Okay. Albertson?
Here.
Bueller? Bueller. Danforth?
Here.
Lallam?
Here.
Manti? Absent. Roby? Absent. Solom?
Here.
Thorson?
Here.
Billhauer?
Here.
Y?
Present.
Thank you.
The first item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda, and I would like to pull item 1C, which is the appointments of members to the Home Rule Charter Commission. I'm going to put that after item 7. And is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Bueller. Second by Y. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is public comment, and this is the time set aside for anyone who wants to say something about anything that isn't on the agenda. So I don't see anybody. I do have a letter from Beth Manti, who isn't here tonight. As you can see, her seat is empty, and she felt that an explanation was due for that. And so I will read this letter that Beth wrote for all of you. Written December 3rd, 2018. Greetings all. I realize it has been a while since many of you, council and public, have been updated on my present situation and the often empty chair. I've asked Sarah, who has graciously agreed to read this letter on my behalf. I am still out of town. First, I would like to reassure the community and my fellow council members that the majority of my responsibilities as an elected official take place beyond sitting in my chair at meetings. I rarely miss a committee meeting and return emails and phone calls as soon as I am up to it. With the assistance of the mayor, other council members, and great city staff, I get the information I need to resolve an issue both the best and as quickly as I can. While I may occasionally miss a few votes, I do not feel I am neglecting my ward, committees, and those who reach out. Many of you know that my son died less than 18 months ago. That wound is still raw, but I am learning to build a life around that hole in my heart while we do our best to make sure his widow and young children have a good life. During this same period, my brother had open heart surgery. We have experienced the death of 2 other family members, and my sister-in-law underwent surgery that did not go well and will not only require an extended hospital stay, but long recovery. My mother-in-law has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and my own mother had a massive heart attack with significant complications on the day after Thanksgiving. There are many more, but the reason I have chosen to share just these few events is that most people may experience 1, maybe 2, or not a 1 in their lifetime, much less in 18 months. The point is that this is an anomaly. These are the things that I have little or no control over. However, Many are being resolved, and some normalcy is returning to my life. I never saw any of this coming. No one can. The council has never been too far from my mind throughout all of this. At times, I thought resigning was the best thing to do. But in the remainder of my term, I see so many things I can still accomplish, such as a safe housing program. Much of what was started downtown 6 years ago is becoming a reality, and seeing those through is so important to me. Obviously, further discussion with the mayor and council members regarding my fitness to remain is understandably warranted under the circumstances I have shared. About that empty chair, please note that if I feel I am not in the best frame of mind or too emotional to make good decisions, the decision not to attend a meeting is the best one. Thank you so much for allowing me to share this with you all. I'm still in Wisconsin, and as you may imagine, it is all about football these days. With best regards, Beth Manty. All right. That being done, I'll move on to item number 3, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Moved by Vilhauer. Second by Albertson. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 4 is the application for a transfer of ownership and location of a retail on-off sale malt beverage and video lottery license from AMPT LLC, doing business as Roadhouse 81, 621 5th Street Southeast, to Alan Scott, doing business as Sassy's on Broadway, 12 South Broadway. So I'll look for a motion for approval, and then I'll open the public hearing. Moved by Danforth, second by Bueller. All right, the public hearing is open. Is there anyone here to talk about this issue? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Does council have any questions or comments to make about this? All right, seeing none, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 5 is application for a transfer of ownership and location of a retail on-off sale malt beverage and video lottery license from Alan Scott, doing business as Sassy's on Broadway, 12 South Broadway, to Rock McGillivray, inactive, 72 Paradise Drive. So I'll look for a motion and second for approval. Motion by Albertson and second by Thorson. And I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone here to speak about this? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Council, do you have any questions or comments about this one? Seeing none? Oh, Councilman Vilhauer?
Let's see, refresh my memory. When a license goes inactive, there's a certain period of time within which it has to be reactivated. Am I correct in that, or?
For a liquor license, yes. I believe, is this a liquor license or a beer?
It's a malt beverage.
Yeah, this is malt beverage and video
Okay.
lottery. Liquor license has to be used in 2 years. Within the 2-year period, it has to be used
Okay.
for at least 60 days, but there is no such requirement on a malt beverage.
Good question. Good refresher. Anyone else? Okay, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 6 is the second reading of ordinance number 18-25, amending zoning district boundaries by rezoning lots 1 through 3, block 3 of Watertown Development Company addition to I-1 Light Industrial District. I'll look for a motion and second for approval, and then open the public hearing. Moved by Vilhauer. Second by Bueller. Okay, the public hearing is open. First, I'll have Heath. Do you want to say some words about this?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Second, before the council tonight is second reading for this zoning map amendment that's been proposed by the landowners out in the Watertown Development Company Industrial Park area that includes 3 lots to be rezoned from I-2 Heavy Industrial to I-1 Light Industrial District. As this far in the process, this did pass the Planning Commission with recommendation of approval. Is before the council, second reading this evening.
Okay. Is there anyone here that would like to speak about this? See none, I will close the public hearing. Council, do you have any questions or comments? All right, none. I'll look for action then. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 7 is ordinance number 18-27, revising and amending section 5.0301 to adopt with modifications the 2018 editions of the International Residential Code, International Building Code, International Property Maintenance Code, International Mechanical Code, and International Existing Building Code. So look for a motion and second for approval. And, okay, we've got a motion by Lallam. Second by Solemn. And I'll ask Ken Buchholz, the building official, to come up and answer any questions that anyone may have. Ken, do you want to say anything off the bat?
No, not really. We kind of discussed it at the first reading a little bit, so if there's any additional questions from anybody. The only other comment when they did ask me before is, how come we waited? Generally, we wait for Sioux Falls to adopt the next code, and then, because they have a lot of manpower and they spend a lot of time going through all the codes, and then they'll let us go and look at all their research and go through it. Well, they haven't adopted it yet either, but Spearfish was kind enough to give us what they had on it to help with our review. Just an FYI thing.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Really? None. That's a lot that we're adopting. So this is good. This will keep us in line. I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Ken. Okay. I moved the Home Rule Charter Revision Commission nominations to this time, and I would like to just take a moment to read the names of those who have been nominated for this commission. By me at large, I've nominated Nancy Turbeck-Berry. For Ward A, Don Roby nominated Dan Gabriel and Selena Engels. Mike Danforth nominated Buffy Hesh and Byron Calise. Ward B, John Solom nominated Melanie Hodorf and Nate Graff. Adam Lallam nominated Tom Beednell and Kyle Lallam. For Ward C, Beth Manty has nominees Greg McDonald and Angie Reppy. And Brad Thorson has nominees Roger Whittle and Deb Ernst. Ward D, Bruce Bueller has nominees David Vanderweedy and Jeannie Vanderweedy, and Josh Y has nominees Kristen Henderson and Chris Wilson. And in Ward E, Dan Albertson has the nominees Mark Roby and Carla Roby, and Glenn Vilhauer has nominated Jason Beekler and Chris Carter. So I'll look for a motion and second to approve those nominees.
So moved.
Moved by Lallam, second by Y. Is there any discussion? Councilman Vilhauer?
My only question is not on the list. I fully support it. Who convenes the first meeting? I mean, how does
The
that
city
process?
council will set that meeting, and at our, they start meeting in January.
Right.
So I would think
Do we
probably
te-
at the next meeting.
so we
can set
tell them when the first meeting is?
Matt, do you want to answer?
Well, I guess I'm the liaison to the Home Rule Charter Revision Commission, so, yeah, we would just tell them when the meeting is, I suppose. Probably send out an email to that group and get some times that work for everybody as soon as we can in the first part of January. Or actually, we could send out the email and get that information now
Right,
to have the meeting as soon as possible in January.
right. And then whatever the, looks like the most convenient time is, that'd be, I don't know that we need action on that, but Councilman Lallam?
Just for clarification, they elect a chairman. Will they elect a vice chair as well in case someone happens to be gone?
Yes.
Is that how it works?
Yes.
Chairman,
have a s-
chairperson, I should say.
Yes.
Do they have voting power, or are they only in case of a tie?
Oh, I think they're voting.
They have voting power?
They're voting.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know. I just
Yeah.
trying to figure out how that worked.
Right.
Right.
And we'll have a packet of information for each committee member to review and make sure they have a charter. And I don't know that they need to get together any before January, but there'll be communications before January. So, any other questions or comments? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 8 is the first reading of ordinance number 18-26, the supplemental appropriations. Kristen?
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, it is that time of year again where we look at our 2018 budget. The ordinance before you is a few of the accounts that we feel need to have a supplement. I won't go over all of them. This is the first reading, but some of the ones that are a little bit bigger I will cover. If you look at the police department, they requested the $7,000 for their fuel and then the $22,000 for the patrol cars. The $22,000 in the patrol cars, if you remember in 2017, they had one patrol vehicle that was damaged. And just because of the timing, it didn't actually become purchased again until 18 after that budget had been set. They do have the revenue to offset this from the insurance, but this is to supplement the expenditure. The next one under the fire department is the SCBA equipment. That is the $27,000, and that was offset by the firehouse subs donation, the grant that they received. Then when we look at the ambulance department, the big increase for the clerical and operating was due to a retirement. Those are kind of we don't really always know when those happen, and that usually can throw it off. If we kind of go down, the next one under the Park and Rec Fund that I'd like to touch on is under the softball baseball complex. When we look at that one, we had a repair to the irrigation equipment. My understanding is that a pump went out at Cook Complex, and then the $21,500 is in the water. We're still having a tough time just gauging. Now this is another full year after the first one. We didn't really know because we were doing so much watering to when the grass was new, but obviously now we kind of have a little bit better handle on the water. Under the ice arena, that is some continued repairs that seem to be happening on the equipment. It's kind of the unknown right now of some of that equipment out there, so Jay felt that this would cover some of those repairs. City Park, the $6,000, that was due to some pedestals that were damaged. I think that was part of the flood. There was some flood issues and a couple of the pedestals. The electrical pedestals were damaged, so we had to fix those. If we flip over to the BBB fund, the $7,000 supplement there is actually just to cover the amount that we took in for donations. We actually paid that back out to the chamber, so it's just kind of more of an accounting covering the expense. The $33,000 in the capital improvement fund is for a traffic impact study that was done, so that's to supplement that line. For the industrial park and the improvements to buildings, I do want to touch on that. The $275,000. You might remember that when I did the library supplement, I actually put that under the general fund, and that was my mistake. I shouldn't have. It should have been here in the 212. So I will do some accounting to move that around. So the general fund will not see that 105 for the boiler. That will come under the capital improvement fund. Then the other 170,000 of that is what we discussed is probably going to be needed for the event center. That'll be to cover the boiler and the HVAC system. So that's to supplement that. And then the last thing is the airport fund. We're going to supplement the overtime $10,000. There was an open position for some of it, so then that always kind of has to be backfilled with overtime. And I will point back up to in the general fund, you will see that to cover the overtime in the airport, you'll be transferring $10,000 from the general fund. So just to cover that. So if there's any questions, I can try to answer them, but otherwise this is a first reading.
Councilman Vilhauer?
Krishna, explain how we handled the additional work that we did in the gun range and why that wouldn't show up here.
If you remember, kind of throughout the year, we've been doing some of that already. So that was actually done, I think, back in October we did one. So we'd had already taken care of that. So that's why you don't see it on here.
Councilman Danforth.
Kristen, on some of the items that we're doing at the event center, some of those are replacement of very significant items out there. And is it right for those to fall under the general fund and not the capital side, the 212 fund?
No, and that's where it is, the cap. I said that I did the library one wrong. Earlier in the year, we supplemented when the library had their boiler issue, and I did the supplement out of the general fund. I will be moving that,
Right.
and both the library and the boiler and HVAC at the event center are coming out of the capital improvement.
Oh, they are?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
right,
so
okay.
that'll be our second penny. Yep.
All right, good questions. Anyone else? All right, thank you, Kristen. The next item on the agenda is the first reading of ordinance number 18-28, revising and amending certain provisions of Title 10 to adopt the 2018 version of the International Fire Code and to make other miscellaneous changes related to fire protection and prevention. And I know the fire marshal's areas. Chip Primus is here to answer any questions about this, and also Chief Doug Kranz. This is the time for doing adoptions of codes, isn't it?
That's correct.
Okay, tell us about this, Chip.
Basically, every 3 years, the new codes come out for the ICC, and the ICC basically does the fire code and the building code, and we're in the 2012 right now. We usually skip 2 years, and right now we're just updating to the 2018 code
Do they have a new code every year?
every 3 years.
Oh, okay, so we didn't skip any. It's not like we left a couple of them.
Right. We didn't adopt the 15, and actually,
Oh, I see, okay.
and quite a few jurisdictions
Right.
didn't do that. It was pretty. They made a bunch of changes in the 15, and then now they changed them back in the 18. So.
Right, so if we did
better.
not adopt this, would that affect our stellar ISO rating?
Yes. Yeah, we have to be so many years, and I can't remember the exact number, and we have to have the code adopted, but we also have to make sure that we're, following the code.
All right. Are you recommending any amendments to it?
No, there's no amendments to it.
Okay.
We did do some on the residential. You'll see residential sprinkler part. The ICC, what they did is they said every resident should have a sprinkler system, a new residence, when it's built, and then the state did the law where no jurisdiction can require single-family residents to have a sprinkler system. They changed at the state level, so we do the multifamily dwelling. That's what we're talking. That's what that change is.
Okay. All right. Some minor modifications. Any questions, Council?
I just have a quick one. Does
Councilor
that,
Bueller?
over here, Chip, does that include duplexes? Would they have to have?
What we did is we didn't go with, we went up to 5 or more. We kept the fourplexes out and the duplexes. Theoretically, ICC says they're all supposed to have sprinklers too, but for a duplex and a fourplex, if there's more than 4 bedrooms in those buildings or in those dwelling units, then we require sprinklers, just so somebody doesn't get a fourplex and have, 16 bedrooms, which would be a lot of people. We want to protect that. So.
Okay. Any other, Councilman Lallam?
So Chip, what you're saying is anything that is essentially a 5-unit, which would be a commercial property versus a 1 to 4 unit property.
That's correct.
You are requiring sprinkler systems then, unless they
Yes.
have 4 bedrooms per unit?
That if they're under the 3 units, which falls under the International Residency Code, if I remember right, is that right, Ken? 3 or more is commercial for the residents. So if there's 3 or more apartments, then it's commercial. Otherwise, if it's a duplex, it's under the International Residency Code.
Okay.
Others? Councilman Albertson?
Chip, I have a question. It says that deficiencies are discovered within 30 days. Then what happens? They send you a letter, they tell you what they are, but what's the follow-up for it?
Basically, what that does is to ensure, like, if a vendor, a company that comes in and checks the sprinkler system or checks the fire alarm system and it's non-compliant, it's not working, well, usually, you know, they'll call me right away if there's a big issue, but this just requires them to send me a report. So then what I'll do is I'll document it and look at it right away, and if it's something that I need to go address right away, then they'll address it. But like it could be the $250 fine or $200 fine. You know, we could find the vendors, you know, but we've never had to do that. Never. I don't see it happen. It's a good working relationship we have with the vendors.
Okay. Others? All right, thank you. Item number 10 is resolution number 18-49, setting aside the levy against Lot 11 in the special assessment roll arising from Street Project 1801D, resolution number 18-43, pursuant to SDCL 9-43-134. I'll look for a motion and second for approval. Moved by Lallam, second by Danforth, and I would like Matt to explain what's going on here.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is in regards to a special assessment that was recently completed, or the assessment process was completed in October. It's the corner of 26th Street Southeast and 14th Avenue. It'd be just southwest or west-southwest of Walmart. One of the lots abutting that improvement, Lot 11, has the owners have come forward and requested to re-subdivide that lot. Re-subdivision is not allowed when there's a current assessment levied against the lot. So what this provision of statute allows us to do is to set aside the assessment and reassess it. So what this resolution will do is set aside the assessment just on Lot 11. After the resolution passes and the 20-day period is up, the plat will come forward. They'll replat it into 3 separate lots, and then we will reassess the property with the current configuration once the re-subdivision is complete. The net effect financially to the city is 0. Essentially what will happen is there'll be 2 lots that will now abut the new road that will bear their proportion of the assessment.
All right, and this was discussed previously in the committee meeting and received a recommendation.
Correct.
So, any questions, Councilman Danforth?
Is there a time frame for which that replatting has to be done? Is there a deadline for that, or shouldn't there be when we have an assessment issue?
Well, they already, you know, Heath has the plat in hand. We're basically just waiting for this levy to come off the lot. Kristen will then sign it, we'll file it, and so it's going to happen imminently.
Okay.
Yep.
Other questions? Okay. All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 11 is authorization of emergency purchase of a boiler for the Watertown Event Center. I'll look for a motion and second for approval.
So moved.
Got a motion by Albertson and a second by Y. And I would like Heath to explain this process here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This is a unique action item, I would presume, in my short time here anyway. An emergency procurement of any equipment by the governing body of the city is allowed by state statute, but there are certain criteria that have to be met in order to do that and to forego the otherwise implemented bid laws that are in place. A little bit of background story on the event center boilers. We've had recent meetings here in the over the last month regarding the boilers and their operation at the event center, or lack of operation, I should say. There have been issues with them shutting down. We've had HVAC professionals on site and troubleshooting these existing boilers. They are approximately 14 years old, and in today's commercial boiler industry, that is about the end of their expected life cycle, which would be identical to what we've experienced with the library boilers, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly. So throughout those meetings, we've decided to make the boiler replacement priority among a litany of other HVAC concerns and issues that are out there at the event center. And I had actually begun putting together documentation to go through the formal bid process to procure boilers for the event center. During that time, recent information is brought forth that the boilers again have shut down, one and then the other, and giving the current state of the boilers and the circumstances that we're in, and in coordination with the city attorney, we've felt comfortable in proceeding with the emergency procurement clause of state statute. So what staff did last week was actually gave direction to a HVAC professional to order the boilers, the replacement boilers. And the action item before council tonight is a confirmation of those emergency boiler procurement from that contractor. Before ordering them, I did secure an estimate of costs in the amount of $82,850, which is an all-inclusive cost for installation, demolition, installation, any subsidiary piping, electric that needs to be done. And also in consideration of that cost, I compared it to the library boiler bid that was just recently bid and awarded to the same contractor, Redlinger Brothers. The library boilers are the exact same make, model, size of boiler that are needed for the event center, coincidentally. So what I did is I assessed that bid at $96,800 and compared it to our estimate of $82,000 for the event center, realizing that there was other subsidiary plumbing work that needed to be done at the library. It still felt like a good, comfortable estimate, for my professional opinion, to move forward with that procurement. And that's the action before you this evening, is just to confirm that procurement, that we move forward in that direction.
And the motion did not include the contractor Redlinger Brothers Plumbing and Heating and the amount of $82,850. But that's what you intended in your motion, right? Whose motion was that?
And if I could add,
Yeah, because that's in the packet.
if I could add, Mayor, what makes this emergency status would be the current condition and questionability of these current existing boilers to make it through the normal bid process and the procurement phase that we would otherwise have to follow. If they were to fail completely, which that risk is prevalent or possible, we would be without heat at that facility. And that's the basis we determined the emergency procurement clause to be effective under.
Right, every day that we delay to do some other process is the day we're without heat at the event center. So that was a good reason for doing the emergency clause. Any questions?
This is for both boilers, correct? The replacement of both?
Yes.
That is correct, yeah.
And then do we still have an air conditioning issue to fix?
Yes, we do. We do. And that's not ready to go yet, but we'll be doing that very shortly.
And that's not in the budget either, correct?
No, but that was on the supplement that Kristen just had the first reading. So, yep, got it covered. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 12 is authorization to approve the renewal for the workers' compensation policy for 2019 and authorization for the finance officer to issue a special check. So for a motion, second for approval. Moved by Vilhauer, second by Danforth. And Kristen, will you please explain this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Before you is the City of Watertown's work comp renewal. There's not really a lot to go over. This is actually going to be paid in January of 2019. That is the reason for the special check request. So this is 2019's expenses. But as far as how it compares to last year, you'll see in the packet on the third page, it covers what the municipal utilities pays, and then it covers what the city pays. The city will actually see a decrease of $2,000 and $2,095. So I think the renewal came in good. That is just because our modifier was a little bit better. And the modifier is based off of the number of claims you have in a certain time frame. So that means that the city's been doing really well. So our modifier gave us more of a discount. Other than that, I can try to answer any questions, but otherwise it's pretty straightforward, and I felt like it was a good renewal.
Councilman Vilhauer?
I've got a couple of questions, Kristen. We get audited every year, don't we?
Yes.
Okay. And typically, how does that turn out? I realize some years.
We've always been pretty much between our estimate and what the audit, very close. The one good thing with SDML is, you know, they're open to always discussing how you code your employees. And this year we didn't have any. We had one group that we agreed to change, and that was actually in the engineering. But before then, pretty much now I think we have everybody kind of where they should be as far as the work comp code.
I guess that was my next question. Then who determines the classifications? I mean, is that?
It's a little bit of a working together. I mean, we work with, they let us know what other communities are seeing. They look at our job descriptions. We identify what our staff is doing, how often they're doing it. Is it the majority of their job? Is it only happening every now and then? And that's what you do, is you then place your employees into those work comp codes based off of really what they're doing. So it's kind of nice because they explained to us too what other communities are seeing. The big one that we had the change in, I think that was a couple years ago, was with the landfill, and a lot of municipalities and were having to change because of the automation of the trucks. The workers' job duties were changing, so they kind of keep you up on that stuff.
Other questions? Councilman Lallam?
Kristen, is this typical that we do this December the year before?
Yep, this is standard. This is how we've always been doing it. So, yep, we will pay for 2019 the very first day of January.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 13 is consideration for the issuance of a certificate of completion for 8th Avenue Southeast and 26th Street East in East Park Edition. And I'll look for a motion second for approval. Moved by Bueller. Second by Lallam. Heath, will you explain this, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So before the council this evening is the issuance of a certificate of completion for development improvements related to both 8th Avenue Southeast and a portion of 26th Street Southeast. Both of these segments of roadway are part of the development improvements for East Park Development. They were installed on behalf of the developer, Coho Incorporated. This particular project and what we are certifying to be complete included public improvements for sanitary sewer, storm sewer, and street improvements. What the certificate of completion does is the first step of two steps in a closeout process for development to go through when there are public infrastructure improvements that the city is accepting for public ownership and maintenance. This first step, certificate of completion, certifies that the work was done to the plans and specs and that everything is installed appropriately and adequately and 100% complete. We have, city engineering staff has inspected the site and confirmed that and make recommendation to the council to issue these certificates of completion, which I will note then initiate the 1-year warranty date.
All right, thank you. Any questions about this? This was reviewed in committee and recommended for approval. No questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 14 is resolution number 18-50, acceptance certificate for 8th Avenue Southeast from 26th Street East to Willow Creek Drive in East Park Edition. And the this road wasn't part of East Park Addition, but it was adjacent to East Park Addition. So I'll look for a motion and second for approval. Moved by Lallam. Second by Danforth. And Heath, would you describe this one too?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is the second part of that two-part process that I just described, and the reason we're executing this one for this portion of 8th Avenue Southeast is that it has effectively gone through a warranty period. For whatever reason, the timing of this project and the circumstances, it was never brought forth to the council for certificate of completion, but that was the action we just took. And in lieu of initiating a 1-year warranty on this particular segment of road that was just certified to be complete, staff felt it was appropriate, since it's been in place for at least a year and a half, that it has effectively gone through a 1-year warranty period, and we were comfortable, based on the inspection, in recommending final acceptance of this portion of roadway to the City Council.
Thank you. Any questions? This was also discussed in committee, so all right, I'll look for action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 15 is old business, and some of you probably remember summer of 2017 I assembled a development committee, and we began taking input on how we can improve the development process, and we were reviewing the development procedures for the city, and there was a disruption in the city engineers. We had a break with a city engineer left, and then we had the hiring process, and we hired Heath, and so there, we pressed pause during that period, and Heath's been here now for 5 months?
Just over 3 months.
3.5
months.
Okay, 3.5 months. Anyway, he's been coming up to speed very nicely, and I asked him to give an update on what's going on with our development process. So, Heath, if you'll go ahead and do that for us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try to keep this very brief, and I would like to emphasize this is a, as I noted on the title page here, this is a brief look at the current procedures and some of the upcoming recommendations from the City Engineer's Office regarding our development processes. I'll kind of generally provide a background on what, in my mind, the development process should look like and what it entails. And then I'll get into just a little bit of detail on what some of our current processes include, and then what some of the potential recommendations will be down the road here in the near future. So this diagram here I thought would just help visualize and what a streamlined, smooth, effective, efficient, comprehensive development process might look like. It starts over here at the left at project conception. And, you know, this is where obviously somebody in the community owns a piece of land and they want to build something on it, whether it's a garage or a commercial development or a multitude of residential lots. There's a conception that's born, and they put some conceptual designs together and approach the city and start having discussions on how to make that happen. One of the first steps, of course, for us is where we receive an application, and then subsequent to that, we review it. We require any corrections be made that are necessary based on that review. And then the third step for us is the permitting process, where we actually issue the hard permits for those development improvements. Those come in many different forms. Sometimes it's a simple building permit. Sometimes it's a floodplain development permit, grading permits. We have all kinds of different permits that fall under this process. And then here's kind of a breaking point to where I left some connectivity here because it is a back and forth, but once the city goes through and completes the permitting process, it kind of falls back onto the developer at that point and their engineer and their contractor to do the construction. And that's what the next step is you have construction and inspection phase of the development improvements.
And then the city, and this can last anywhere from a year to 2 years, sometimes a lot longer, depending on the project. But then the final step where the city gets back involved again is what we just took action on tonight: the acceptance, the warranty initiation, and the closeout of those development improvements. So in a nutshell, this is effectively what a streamlined development process would look like, and some of the main points of the steps along the way. I'll just briefly touch on each one of these steps in relation to the city of Watertown and some of the comments that I've picked up on, some of the things that I've noticed, some of the areas I really see a lot of room for improvement on, some of the things I think we're doing well. But at step one, the application and submittal process, we do have room for improvement here. And a few of these notes over here are some of those suggestions for improvement. We do have general categorizations of what kind of application is being submitted, but that really is what drives this whole development process. If it's a subdivision, being residential or commercial, which would include a plat, rezoning, and things of that nature, along with the construction plans and design reports and other components that are required. But sometimes you get a little simpler submittals, like a commercial site that wants to put a building on an already platted parcel. And there's certain protocol that should be followed in that scenario. And then there's even simpler examples yet, where somebody's just getting a building permit. There's no utility services that even need to be connected, but it's just a simple building permit, where a real streamlined plot plan review can be, process can be taken under and streamline that permitting process. This sheet on the left, I didn't put it on there with the intentions to be able to read it necessarily, but what it is it's kind of a categorizational flow chart of 3 different types of submittals, and they have these if-then statements. And what this document does, I'll be straightforward, I pirated this from another community that I used to work for, but what this sheet does is not only help staff steer the submittal process at the application level, but it's also an important piece of information in the application packet that all the developers, their consultant engineers, and the people in the community can reference and look at so that they know what their permit application process will look like. To me, getting to a point like this, which we're close to, but I think we could really polish it and make it a little bit more effective than what it is. But that'll really help everybody involved in this process. Moving on to the next step of plan review and corrections. The targeted goal of any plan review is this right here, is to get a permit issued. So after we have our applications in and all the documents are submitted that need to be submitted, this plan review is initiated. Now internally, that's where the city needs to have their A game in order to turn these things around effectively and efficiently. We need to know who needs to be part of this particular type of permit application. Is it just internal between engineering and planning and building? Or does it need to be expanded out into the full design review team? Do we need to invite the Watertown Municipal Utilities? How expansive does this review need to be? And that really, again, is driven on the type of application that was submitted. It's important to note, too, submittal deadlines for applications are important to have, and it's important to have that structure for a couple reasons. One, it helps us coordinate an efficient review. We can take a group of applications in at once and process them according to the review calendar instead of taking them in on a la carte basis and having all these overlapping projects where we tend to lose in the translation of things which one came in first and which one's due out first. And so having a formalized submittal calendar and a known time to review is very important to this process too. We have some measures in place that help with this part of the review process, but again, I think it's an area that we could really polish and help formalize and then share that information to the applicants. I wanted to stress here that it's time to review. It should always be fair and reasonable for any city staff to turn around a permit. You don't want to have that prolonged indefinitely and to an egregious amount of time to where the developer's held up on their project. I understand that completely. I know that, and my staff know that. but also we do need time to go through the appropriate level of review processes. So it's kind of that checks and balance, and there's a fine line of appropriate time that should be allocated for those reviews. And then having additional time for corrections. That's another important part of that process, where if we kick something back because some criteria wasn't met, that does prolong, obviously, the time it's going to take to get that permit. But having an understanding of what that timeline is and have it spelled out in our subdivision regulations, I think that's an important aspect. And this last step here, too, is a simple one, but I've been involved in a couple conversations here where not having a formally approved stamped construction set of plans that says this was approved by the city has tended to cause some confusion on past projects. Getting to a point, and this is a simple step, that's something simple that we can initiate immediately. We don't need to have a action from council to do that. But it's where we're simply marking and filing the official construction set of plans that are on record at the city of what was approved to be built. And that then helps throughout the construction phase if there's questions that come up. But what we find a lot of times is we're working on one set of plans here in our office. The developer's contractor has another set of plans. It was one of the few renditions that we've received for review. And his subcontractor might even have a third set of plans that they pulled from the owner some time back. So we're trying to get to a point where everybody's working from the same set of plans and eliminate any confusion in that respect. Issuing the actual permit. Of course, there's varying levels of approvals in order before a permit can go out, again, hinging all back on what type of application was submitted. There are prerequisites that need to be met for certain types of applications. Contractor licensing, whether it needs to go to the Planning Commission for approval, the Parks Board, Board of Adjustment, the City Council. Those are all types of prerequisites that we already have in place for our permitting review process. But ultimately, it usually boils down to city staff, once these guidelines are met, of issuing the permits. In this area, one of the things I'd like to continue to build on is our permit forms and types, and making sure that we have a formal form for each type of application that we receive. We're for the most part there, but again, just some polishing that we need to do in that area to make sure that our documents match consistently throughout this development process. Construction and inspection. This comes into play primarily. What I'm referring to here is when a development includes public improvements such as sanitary sewer, storm sewer, streets, curb and gutter, in some cases rec trails or pathways, or public sidewalk that the city would take over because of adjacent to a public lot or things of that nature. This does take a large amount of coordination with the developers and their agents, both the developer's engineer and their contractor. They are responsible to build according to the approved plans. And what our role should be in the city engineering office, in my view, is that we do have some involvement in that construction phase. Right now, to my understanding, it is pretty minimal. I don't think staff is getting out at any of the critical points of the development improvement construction to inspect on these development projects. Some of those critical points, for example, proof rolling the base course before paving goes down, make sure there aren't any soft spots. Sometimes observation of trench backfill procedures or utility installation on the sanitary sewer installation. Just making sure that service line connections are being installed to our specs before everything gets buried in the ground. And that's not saying that I'm recommending full-time inspection out there, which some communities do require, but I do think we should have a little bit more of a presence than we do right now, just to make sure that the specs are being met. Absolutely. Councilman Danforth?
Sometimes what I've seen historically is, and I think we all have a little bit, is that plans get approved, the project gets started, and then something comes up in process. Might be out in the field where you or somebody else might be out there talking to the contractor or the developer, possible changes are discussed, potentially even agreed upon. How is that going to be handled when it comes to having the approvals officially done? Because that we ran into that where then it becomes a he said, she said thing when things don't get followed up on. How in this process will that be handled?
That's a great question. From my previous experiences, one of the ways that's handled, and there's probably a multitude of ways we could look at this, but I think documentation is the key. When a developer's engineer wants to redesign a component of the approved plans because something isn't a good fit in the field, that happens all the time. It happens on our city capital projects. We understand that. And so if that engineer wants to propose to us that change, we can turn that review and approval around in a quick hurry and do a quick amendment to the approved plans in that regard. Sometimes that's as simple as emails being shot back and forth with some attachments. But if we had a formal amendment document that when the discussion was over, we simply had their engineer submit to us to sign and approve, that's one quick and easy way to address those issues. Then you have a document in the file that shows that that discussion happened and that it was agreed upon by all parties to move forward in that direction. But again, that's just one of many ways that I think we could brainstorm to effectively make sure that that process is followed through and documented accordingly so that we don't forget what the conversation was 6 months ago. Other parts of the construction process, of course, the permit duration is of importance. We do put certain time restrictions on many of our permits, whether it's a year or 2 years. 2 years for most of them, on from my experience anyway, in my short time here. But I think it comes down to how long should construction carry on, and I think the answer to that depends on the circumstances for the development. Do you have a residential subdivision with platted lots and homes being built, and how much longer should we let the asphalt paving carry on before it's complete, as an example? So I think I just wanted to point out why it's important to have a duration of how long that permit is good for to make some of these improvements. And then the final step, project acceptance, the warranty, and the closeout. These two items right here are what are currently outlined in our subdivision regs, and of course, again, are the ones that we executed tonight on a subdivision for development improvements in East Park. And I just wanted to note that, you know, we dug through and we found these steps, and I wanted to implement them on this particular project tonight, but we look forward to continuing implementing these until we tweak or revise this process. Off the cuff, I haven't had a lot of revolutionary thoughts on these two steps, other than I'm wondering if we couldn't streamline it even more, having one of these steps, possibly this one, the certificate of completion, being implemented administratively by the city engineer's office. And the reason I say streamline, what they would effectively do is not have to bring this project to the city council twice for effectively the same thing. Once to certify completion, then a year later to accept it once the warranty's up. So just one minor thought there on that process. It's already currently spelled out in our subdivision regs. General findings. So the item or the underlined and bold items here are really the ones that stand out to me at this point as far as my experience with the city of Watertown and how we review these developments. But what it comes down to really is this top line here, is process, organization, structure, and consistency. And to me, if we can get to a point where we have that, we'll be sailing a lot more smoothly than we have been in the recent past, and even in my short time here. As far as city engineering is concerned, the office that I oversee, which includes the planning component of the city's function, some of the things we can do in regards to the documents that guide development, that regulate development, insert the proper word you want here, but the documents like the comprehensive land use plan, the transportation master plan, the construction specs, the stormwater manual, all these documents are very critical and important to have in place, which the city of Watertown has. but these underlying ones are the ones I think are at the forefront that need to be updated. The engineering design standards have not been updated for quite some time, and to my understanding, were adopted at one point and then maybe redacted and are just kind of a book sitting on a shelf right now. But we need to get back to a formalized point of where we have formal engineering design standards that are adopted, and these go hand in hand with these subdivision regulations. One document references the other in most cases several times, and so that's something at the forefront in our office that we want to get an update put together on, possibly vet it through the Planning Commission. There's a committee that I don't remember the name of yet because I've only met with them once. And just make sure that we've got all the players that have some level of acknowledgement of what is forthcoming. And once they are implemented, that would be the goal of one of the goals of mine, continuing to educate. And that falls down here under efficiency and formalizing the review process. Communicating and educating, I think, I've noticed from the questions I've received, once we get a submittal, that's something that is needed. It hasn't necessarily been a priority, but letting people, the developers in the community know, it's a small knit group of developers in this town. We don't see a lot of new developers often. We do on occasion, but for those that are here and developing frequently, communicating and educating them and taking opportunity to explain these processes so they become intimately familiar with them, so that things aren't a question every step of the way as far as what does the city have to do next? What do I have to wait for next? How long is that going to take? Because those are critical questions, and rightfully so for the developers that want to know those answers. So I want to get to a point where things are better understood about the process and what it entails and what kind of timelines associated with them. One of the key steps in making things more efficient is a plan review software. Right now, we're receiving everything hard copy submittals, occasionally sometimes an email, electronic document submittal. In no case is it a consistent submittal that's vetted through one conduit and then disseminated out to the people that need to review it. And don't get me wrong, staff does a great job with the process we have in place. We work very closely with Ken, the building official, and with the other departments that are associated with these plan reviews. But this plan review software would bring everybody to the table through a few clicks of a button, and it really does streamline the review process. That's something we began to review with our IT department. We have some public works software budgeted for 2019, and what we're hoping to accomplish is that public works software has a module for plan review and permitting included in it. Let's see if there's any other highlights on here. This step up here that I kind of skipped over, I've kind of touched on that, hit and miss throughout this discussion. But again, having a formalized application process, standardized forms that are consistent with every type of application that's like that, and then the checklists. These checklists I refer to, we've got several created, and I think the mayor even actually was involved in the past in helping create some of these checklists. And that really does help keep this process wound together and make sure that things don't slip through the cracks. And I don't mean that from a sense of from the developer's side or just from the city staff side, but on both ends. If we, with these checklists in place, it's clear to the applicant or their agent what they need to give us, and it's also clear to my staff what they need to be looking at. And so it helps on both ends of the table in a review process when we implement these checklists and follow through with them and the requirements on them. So generally, that was the discussion I wanted to share with everybody this evening. And again, just a real general heads up for what was forthcoming.
Thank you. Councilman Vilhauer?
Heath, how do we communicate or coordinate with the utilities department on a project? I mean, who runs the show there?
That is a very good question, and one that I have had a lot of ideas on and hope to improve and bridge that gap that I think exists to some extent. Now, again, I don't say that to fault anybody in their current positions, but I do see a room for great improvement there, and I've already implemented ways to start reaching out to the utilities. on these inspections, for example. I had Colin contact municipal utilities to come out on this 8th Street and 26th Street inspection. I don't know as though that's anything we've ever done together in the field. And their water infrastructure that's in the ground is just as critical as our sewer infrastructure that's in the ground. So in my mind, it made complete sense that we get their check off, that their water system is acceptable. Even though we're not accepting it as a city proper under the council, we want to know that the rest of the construction that occurred around that water main didn't compromise their water main. Anyway, that was one example of reaching out to them. I've got other ideas on the front end, on the design phase, of incorporating the water plans that a lot of times the municipal utility staff create, trying to incorporate those into this review process so that the developer's engineer can coordinate their design with that water line work. That's a very important part of the design as well. Right now, they're kind of two separate documents, and I'm not sure there's much sharing that goes on, at least not in our office, that we see in relation to the developer's engineer's work and municipal utilities water line work. So that's another gap that I hope to bridge. But there's several ideas along those lines. And I've been working closely with Bert, the new, I forget his title, operations manager, and some of his staff, and hope to continue those discussions.
Good question. Councilman Albertson?
Heath, I had kind of the same question, except I was wanting to put it specifically to the new project coming out here. You know, we have 12-acre building coming up, and who does all the coordinating with the different engineers, and I was going to say utilities and the city, and I mean 12-acre building that Telelect has is a huge, so we don't hold them up, and yet we still, and I don't mean that they're not going to do it right, but how do you set somebody up to just work with a 12-acre building, or what do you do?
And so for that example, when you have a huge development like that with a lot of infrastructure, the one benefit to us as far as public infrastructure is concerned is the public infrastructure is fairly minimal in respect to the size of development that's going on there. A lot of the infrastructure they're putting in is going to be private for their ownership and maintenance and responsibilities in perpetuity. There isn't a lot, relatively speaking, there's not a lot of public infrastructure. But once a project like that gets a building permit and begins construction, some of the key staff on our end would be Ken's staff, the building inspectors that go out and make building inspections throughout certain phases of the progression of the work. And then some of the utility work on a private site like that the inspections we rely more upon the state inspectors for the electrical, the plumbing for private work like that. The state inspectors are relied upon a lot more. But for the public infrastructure components that do exist, again, that's where I hope to reach out to municipal utilities to be part of that whatever extent that we can, so that we're working together, coordinating together, making sure that their infrastructure is put in appropriately, adequately before we cover it up with pavement or before the developer covers it up with pavement. It's kind of you just have to be intentional about it at this point. I guess this is the best way to describe it. We have to be intentional about making sure we communicate those things. And from my understanding, that particular project, even though the scope of it, the contractors are very familiar with developing and building projects like that, of that magnitude, and they know the value of quality inspections of their work throughout that building process. So our building inspector has noted to me, or in conversation more than once, that he's kind of surprised to see them call as much as they do to request inspection at phases that he maybe normally wouldn't even be going out there. So that's been a great level of coordination because of the contractors that are in place on that job, realizing the importance of those inspections.
During the process of that becoming an official project, there were weekly meetings between Terex and Watertown Development Company and the various different city staff members. And Watertown Development Company took the lead on that and made sure every T was being crossed and every I was dotted very carefully, because that was very complex. And it was actually really a well done process. It took months and months to get through all the reviews, and the meetings were really important. That communication was very regular, and with a, you know, you wouldn't have to do that on a smaller scale project, but that model is good for something complex. Are there other questions? Thank you, Heath. It's been very helpful having someone with Heath's experience and expertise in this stepping in, and he's doing a really good job coming up to speed in just a few short months. So appreciate that very much. Is there any other old business? Councilman Danforth?
Mayor, a couple council meetings ago, I had requested an update of what the status of the truck route was. Has anything been done on that, do you know?
Yes, and I might need Heath to talk about this. It wasn't as simple as I thought. Heath, why don't you go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I did reach out to the local area office of the DOT here in Watertown, who forwarded me to the regional office and the traffic engineer of the regional office. And he researched the possibility of installing truck route signs. The feedback that I got is that they felt the current signing was the best that they could do. Their concern is there's conflict with when you have a state route on the national highway system, that you legally, the state cannot legally force truck route traffic on an alternate route unless it is also on the national highway system. Some additional follow-up I need to have yet is posing the question, if we're not forcing them, requiring them to take this truck route, but just offering it as an alternate truck route, is that one way around their concern? I haven't been able to pose that question yet or get an answer to it. But their primary concern was rerouting truck traffic from a national highway system roadway to a non-national highway system roadway when dealing with commercially licensed drivers and operators under the certain permits they might hold for oversized load, the licensing that they have to obtain for those types of situations. I understand why they have concern with that. But again, if we're just offering as an alternate route, I don't know if, I'm hopeful that's maybe a way to put those concerns at ease.
Does that answer your question, Mike? We're hoping they'd go, oh yeah, we got these signs. Here, we'll just put them up.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I look back at that, and I know what our goal and our objective was way back when, to try to get that to be a truck route. It just seems odd that we're sitting here all these years later with it done and being operated, and now understanding that the difficulty of actually having a truck route. You know what I'm saying? It just seems like those things would have come up in the forefront when that was being communicated in the design and acceptance standpoint from the city.
Right.
Because the public is expecting that, and they've always been talked about as being a truck route. And so I think we just put them up. I feel a little bit like Herb Jensen when I said that.
Steve Thorson already did that. They came down quickly.
So the bottom line is, it isn't a designated truck route because of 212 is a U.S. highway, not a state highway, correct?
Correct.
And then so the difficulty of making that all work out from the standpoint of federal highway, state highway.
Yeah. I will do some follow-up with them and pose a couple more questions. And before we completely put that to rest, I did have a couple more questions I wanted to approach them with.
Can I ask a follow-up quick?
Sure.
What if we were successful in it? What would that mean to Highway 212? It would be a requirement to bypass and go around if they weren't doing business in town? Or what's the, if we were to get full truck route signage and conformance, what would we in fact, what would the end result be? What would we see? Would trucks not be allowed on 212? What would we see that we're not seeing today?
That's probably the rub right there is when there is an official truck route, alternate route through a community, trucks have to take it, and they can be ticketed for not taking it. And I'm guessing we're running up against a regulation, but there might be something that we can do and call it a city truck route and mark it as such. And we'll have to have that communication with the Department of Transportation. Councilman?
I have a question. When they start doing the redevelopment of 212, okay, well, I mean, that's certainly going to educate a lot of folks on that use of that bypass, I think, but can we require trucks to take that bypass at certain phases of that construction plan on 212?
That would really be driven by the DOT and their construction traffic detour routes that they establish. If they were to approach us or ask our opinion on that, we could definitely offer that up as an option as far as the use of our city streets for that detour route. But ultimately, it would be up to the DOT and the design of their detour route and how they administer that.
Right, and they would sign it as a required detour route, and they would give someone a ticket if it were signed as a detour route and they weren't taking it. And they did that. They've done that on other highways through town where they've allowed cars but not trucks. And when trucks take it, sometimes it's an accident. But, they follow some protocol on how to label and what to use for signage. And it's all with good intentions for safety in mind.
Well, and I know way back when this whole concept came up, originally the bypass, we called it a bypass, but would have been that north route from the north exit. And then there was discussion about having an interchange on the interstates where we would go east of where that bypass is. I don't know if that's ever going to come to fruition, but
it will.
That was the original concept for that bypass.
Someday it will. Yep, and it has to be warranted, though. The DOT is very careful about how they spend those federal dollars, and putting an interchange on an interstate route is not inexpensive, has to meet the warrants, and I think it will someday, and when it does, that's when they'll consider it, and not sooner. Yeah, it won't be cheaper. Any other questions about that? Is there any other old business? Is there any new business? Are there any liaison member reports? Councilman Vilhauer?
Mayor, I've got a quick update. Friday at the Utility Board meeting, the Utility Board finalized their rate adjustments for 2019. I'll just rattle them off real quick. These are the average adjustments for residential customers, so be careful as far as how we want to try to interpolate that. Electric rates, 1% increase, gas, no change in rates, and water at 2 to 5% rate adjustment for 2019.
Thank you.
Glenn, can I ask a question since you brought this up? When's the last time that we had a gas increase? I mean, it seems like every time there's an increase in utility, it's electric.
There was one a couple years ago. I know since I've been liaison on that board, there was, Bruce, but I can't tell exactly which year that was. But there was one since I've been on, as I recall.
All right. Any other liaison reports? Councilman Albertson?
I'll just report that the system for heating at the library is working. Dee Dee says they have heat, and I'm really pleased that we're doing the same people with the event center here, just because they got the project done, and she said there's still some things that are happening, but they have heat, and that's a major thing, and so that's a good thing going into the winter here, and hopefully that the event center will have the same success with the same person doing, or same company doing it.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, that should be true. Any other liaison reports? All right, none. So moving on to item 18, executive session pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2. We will have an executive session this evening in order to discuss and consult with legal counsel on some contractual matters and personnel matters. We do not expect to take action when we come out. So I'll look for a motion to go into executive session. Moved by Bueller, seconded by Vilhauer. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.